Good morning on this Sunday, May 24th, Memorial Day weekend, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. This week, Governor Brian Kemp says the state has reached a milestone in the number of patients hospitalized with COVID-19. Early voting is underway in Georgia's primary, and while there were lines, many are voting by mail. And a third arrest in the shooting death of unarmed jogger Ahmaud Arbery. Tharon, Phil, and Cathy are joining us from their homes. Brian Robinson is also here filling in for Janelle. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
This week, Governor Brian Kemp told Georgians the state has reached a new milestone in the fight against COVID-19.
In addition to rapidly increasing testing capacity, we have also seen a steady decline in the percentage of patients testing positive for COVID-19.
The governor said less than 1,000 patients with the virus are in the hospital, an almost 40% drop since the beginning of this month. While Governor Kemp said we can't rest on our laurels, he also acknowledged issues with how state officials are reporting data. The Georgia Department of Public Health apologized for its most recent coronavirus data gaffe, explaining a processing error that had incorrectly shown a downward trend in the number of daily new infections.
My goal is to make sure we continue to be transparent and we have the right data up there. And if we don't, we're going to own that, and we're going to tell people what happened, and then we're going to get it fixed, and we're going to keep moving on.
On Friday, at the time of this taping, Vice President Mike Pence was in Atlanta to meet with Governor Kemp and business leaders to discuss Georgia's response to the pandemic. Brian, since you are a guest, we will start with you. While we have a long way to go, the trends we're seeing right now with these numbers are in the governor's favor. And look, we're all hoping that they hold. But what do they say about Governor Kemp's decision to open Georgia so early and the bashing he took from so many critics? Or do you think it's just too early to say?
Well, we knew when the decision was made a few weeks back that he would be either a hero or a goat. And right now it's looking like he could turn out to be courageous, visionary, forward-looking, and perhaps even had taken steps that are going to make our economy come back quicker than other states that have continued their lockdowns even longer. He had some terribly unfair headlines from around the country, talking about Brian Kemp filling up Georgia's graveyards, essentially. And it was always inappropriate. It was always over the top. But the truth is, we didn't know how this was going to turn out. And every risk that Brian Kemp has taken, and they have been risks, have turned out to come out in his favor. The numbers are looking good. The trajectory is still good. And so it's about time that he start getting some credit. He's got the worst approval rating in the country amongst governors. That's not fair. And we need to have a reassessment of the leadership that he has shown.
Tharon, weigh in on this because Atlanta Mayor Bottoms was one of his harshest critics. She said, I guess this week that, she's glad that the numbers aren't as bad as she thought they were going to be. And she announced a 5-phase approach to reopening the city. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Laura, I have a message to my good friend Brian Robinson in the famous words of Lee Corso from College Day. Not so fast, my friend. It is not at a point yet where we should all just relax and think that we're totally open. People are still dying in the metro area. We know that in some of our closest metro counties, people are still testing positive. We are seeing the numbers flatten, but I just think we cannot communicate to the public that everything is fine, and we should not start picking winners and losers just yet. What the mayor did, Lori, is she said in the very beginning, you may remember, is that she said that she hoped that she was wrong, or she hoped that she will be wrong in her criticism of the governor's phased approach. I think what you saw from her is an acknowledgement that we are moving in the right direction. But I think if she was on the show right now, she would tell you that she stand by those concerns that she addressed. And she really, really wants to make sure that the data that we're receiving is consistent and that it's trustworthy. And I think that, they're going to continue to work together. But I want to be very clear. This is not the time to pick winners and losers and just start giving people praise. We need to still protect ourselves and understand that we're involved in a pandemic.
And Phil, I thought the governor, said that at his news conference. He said, we are not resting on our laurels. We have a long way to go. This week, school ended for a lot of students in Metro Atlanta. We saw a lot of virtual graduations. The governor and the state school superintendent created working groups to help schools prepare for the upcoming school year. A lot of parents are anxious, right? Especially working parents who are concerned about what they will do if schools don't open in the fall. Phil, what do you think?
Well, I think that naturally people can be anxious and concerned, but I have to shake my head at Tharon. You know, we can praise some people. There was some good news announced by the governor, and Keisha Lance Bottoms ought to, instead of grudgingly go along with reopenings, she's still not opening barbershops and salons, by the way, but we need to move forward and have some praise here while we're still being cautious about safety. So I think it's great that the schools are having these working groups and figuring out what to do, everything from meals to distance learning to equipment and safety. They're talking about athletics in the fall. Last week I mentioned that the University System of Georgia is going to be having in-person classes. I think that's great. I talked to the head of the Board of Regents, the chair, Sachin Shalendra, and he says that they have a working group of presidents now trying to figure out reopening. You know, Brian Kemp was the first governor in the country to have business reopenings, and I see more traffic. I see a higher morale among people when I'm starting to get out. People are going back to work.
Yeah, I feel that too, Phil. Cathy, you know, some of the CDC guidelines that were released about schools didn't seem all that realistic. I mean, 1 student per seat on buses and then every other seat, young kids wearing masks. Do you think schools will be able to open come August?
Oh gosh, I don't have anything. I don't have any idea because we don't know. You know, there's a prediction of a second wave. Is that a second wave after, you know, that we've just all started going back to business, or is it a second wave that occurs, you know, later in the fall? I think that's a thing, but I think we can look to some other countries that have reopened schools, you know, this spring and sort of look at how they did it. Some of them went to shifts and other kinds of things. But, you know, we're going to get around to talking about the budget. And I think we need to talk about how we're compensating teachers and school systems for the additional expense that it's going to take to manage getting people back to school. And I think that's a big priority for our state. It's a big priority for our country. And it's not going to come at no cost.
And Brian, let's talk about the state budget. I mean, there's no one better, I think, to break down the numbers than the AJC's James Salzer, who's been really writing about these massive cuts for weeks. The cuts will be brutal and will lead to furloughs and layoffs and buyouts for state employees. No agency is protected, including the Department of Public Health, which is on the front lines of this pandemic. Will state legislators look for other ways, do you think, to bring in money?
Well, there's been some talk of a tobacco tax, but I don't see there being any huge movement in that direction. They definitely are not going to raise sales taxes or income taxes, which would be the biggest bang for the buck. That would really bring in the biggest amount of revenue, but you don't want to do that during a recession, and of course Republicans don't want to do that ever because they want people to keep their hard-earned money. So it's going to be really hard. The other thing that they could look at would be sports betting. I don't think casinos are going to get over the hurdle. We're in a very compressed schedule here in these final days of the General Assembly in June. So sports betting may be something. That other one where we need to be very careful. You know, they have processed many more unemployment claims than they did in 2008 and 2009, and they've done it with half of the staff that they had in 2008 and 2009. So it's a remarkable accomplishment, and we need to look at where our highest priority needs are right now.
All right, we'll leave it there. Coming up, Georgia voters are casting ballots, and many of them are not heading to the polls. We'll discuss after the break.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Early voting is underway in Georgia's primary. It's maybe no surprise there were more absentee ballots returned on Monday compared to folks who decided to vote in person. I mean, almost double. President Trump weighed in on this issue this week, saying, you know, this could lead to voter fraud, massive voter fraud regarding voting by mail. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you know, the claims of voter fraud and mail-in voting are way overblown. It really doesn't exist. We have lots of states already that have been doing more aggressive mail-in voting. Oregon is exclusively mail-in voting. So I think this is not something that's of enormous concern, and we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote. And we need to get it right in the primary so that we're ready to execute in the general when it is even more important what happens with our elected representatives.
Phil, do you want to weigh in on that? I mean, as a Republican, does it worry you if voters decide to mail in their ballots because of the coronavirus pandemic?
Yes, you should be worried, and the president is right. Historically, absentee ballots have been the biggest potential for fraud. Just go on the Heritage Foundation website. I have to laugh at Cathy. I don't know where she's been in Georgia. We've had so much fraud. Dodge County, Hancock County. I don't know where she's been. Now, there is some safeguards that Georgia has.
Phil, that's just simply not true. That's just simply not true.
Well, you go on the website, get your documentation. But I will say one good thing about what's happening. And here's the one good news that you might agree with. We're going to be counting these absentee ballots in advance. Now, that was an emergency order, and so we can get the tabulations quicker, and I think we'll still have to wait, though. Remember, these have to be hand scanned, so it could be a long night and into the next day.
Cathy, go ahead if you want to weigh in on that, and then we'll go to Tharon.
Well, I mean, the last real documented case of big voter fraud happened in North Carolina, and it was Republicans. But we'll leave that on the table. I think, again, what we need to do is make sure everybody has the opportunity to vote. People are concerned about going out and going to the polls. Fulton County is still way, way behind. I still haven't received my absentee ballot, and it's been probably 4 weeks since I returned my request. So, there's a lot to do to make sure that we're executing elections right, and that's the most important thing.
Tharon, since we have you back, I want you to weigh in on this, and then we'll move on.
Well, Laura, I want to make sure you can hear me, because it's definitely not my Wi-Fi, because I'm totally connected. So I apologize to our viewers for that mishap, not on my end. But I think I totally agree with Cathy. And Phil is doing a lot of laughing today, but you can't laugh at this. This is a serious matter. Cathy's exactly right. The last proven case of voter fraud was committed in a Republican district in North Carolina. Number two, I do want to compliment Fulton County for sort of getting ahead of the curve and knowing that they have some of the most precious workers. These are people who are in our elderly, more seasoned community, and they tried to extend the hours and actually look at adding more locations because they're anticipating a large number of people to come out and vote. But the bottom line is this, is that the Secretary of State knows that he's got to get this right. We've had problems with the voting machine. I'm shocked to hear that Cathy Woolard still has not received her ballot in the mail. I know a lot of other people that have not received their ballot, but I think at the end of the day, we all got to come together to make sure that we support the local county officials and also the Secretary of State to make sure we get this right, because if not, we're going to be the laughingstock again around the nation.
Brian, I want to switch gears because we had another poll out this week done by Civics for a left-leaning outlet, but it does show similar trends to other polls done here in Georgia in the past few weeks. Very tight Senate races between Republicans and Democrats. What do the numbers tell you?
Well, several things. One, any Republicans who have been in a slumber about how tight this state is, they should be woken up by now. But 2018 should have woken them up. It was a 50,000 vote margin out of 4 million cast. That's a really razor-tight margin. One thing, of course, that I think this proves is that the polling we saw 2 weeks ago that showed that Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins were neck and neck, that poll is by far an outlier, and what we're seeing consistently is a significant 3-1 lead amongst Republicans of Doug over Kelly Loeffler. Now, that's why you see her spending so much money right now. She's got to close that gap. She has the resources to put into it to work toward that. I think most of us are looking between this Monday and Labor Day, this summer months, to see if she can close that gap. But you also are seeing that Doug Collins is 50-50 with the leading Democratic candidates whoever the top Republican vote getter is would face probably one Democrat in January in a runoff. He's neck and neck, whereas the Democrats have leads over Loeffler. So these are our numbers that we're beginning to see in a pattern. And in today, polling, it can be so off. But once you see a pattern, that's when you can really sort of buy in to what is happening. So I think that this gives us a better lay of the land, even though this is a Democratic poll. That's something that we need to keep in mind.
Tharon, in Senate race number 1, that's how we refer to it, we saw Columbus Mayor Teresa Tomlinson come out fighting, saying basically to Dems, don't discount her and put your faith in a 33-year-old with a thin resume, taking a shot obviously at Jon Ossoff. What are your thoughts on this race?
Well, the gloves are off, and for so long, I think that these sort of comparison and contrast attacks by the candidates were sort of postponed because of COVID-19. I think that they see that Jon Ossoff went up very big, very early with a massive TV buy, but Teresa Tomlinson is a fighter. She's come back, she has her own TV ads, and she's had a really good ground game, but also let's not leave out Sarah Riggs-Amico, who went up on the air this week with a very compelling ad as well. So I think that they all understand that right now Jon Ossoff has spent the most money, and I would probably say that he is probably in the lead. However, you got Sarah Riggs-Amico and Teresa Tomlinson, two women that are fighting for the women vote, but also fighting for African American voters that are the backbone of the Democratic Party. So I think this is just a first of many more blows and many more attacks to come in this race.
All right, we'll be watching. We've got to leave it there. Well, coming up, the man who shot the video of the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery is now charged with murder. We'll discuss coming up.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Investigators have charged the man who shot the video capturing the last seconds of Ahmaud Arbery's life with murder. William Roddy Bryan is facing charges. Tharon, we'll start with you. So many questions as to why he was filming this in the first place.
Yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions. But when we talked about this on the show, if it was not for Roddy's video being released, I think by his attorney, we would have never known what actually happened to Ahmaud Arbery. And so I think that was sort of a maybe planned release on his part. I don't know if it backfired or not, but what you are seeing, Lori, is swift actions by the attorneys that are representing the Arbery family, and I think that you're seeing the state getting involved, and you're definitely seeing an amount of transparency. And so, again, this is, I think, one of many more steps in this case, and I just encourage everyone to stay involved because we definitely want justice.
And there's definitely a lot of movement, and we'll stay on top of it. Switching gears, the Atlanta City program responsible for doling out federal funds for housing people with HIV is still a mess. So much so, Mayor Bottom says she wouldn't mind if the state stepped in and took over the program. Phil, I want you to weigh in on this.
Well, the whole program of grants and procurement has been a mess in Atlanta for years, not just under Mayor Bottoms, but before her. And so, I think if the program's not working in the city, it should be taken over. And to segue into the broader picture, Lori, you had the head of the grants program, after 4 months on the job, just quit in frustration because of all of the mess that is occurring with procurement and with grants. And then you had also another person leave the city procurement department alleging, and this is no surprise here, the allegation is that grants are going to politically favored people in City Hall, and that the procurement is rigged.
Cathy, you had mentioned this issue a couple weeks ago. Do you think the state should step in and take over this program?
Well, somebody should, and if it's the state, it's the state. But here's the, Phil just mentioned the people that have left the office. That's a problem. There are allegations that will come out, I think, in the future. I think the U.S. Attorney's Office needs to look very, very closely at what's been going on for years, because people have been talking about this regularly, but we have agencies that are owed $2-3 million that they have to borrow from the bank in a line of credit, pay the interest on, so that 500 people don't lose housing. There's 400 additional people on a waiting list because these agencies are just fed up. They cannot float millions of dollars in interest payments while the city bumbles around trying to figure out where the money is.
Brian, do you think that this issue will bleed over into, that state takeover of the Atlanta airport?
I don't know that the legislators that are hot to trot on the state takeover of the airport are going to be as hot to trot about taking over a grant program like this. So I do think that they can remain separated. But it does provide ammunition to those who say the city of Atlanta just can't manage a big operation that's important, that there's always this endemic corruption or mismanagement. So that's where it's the bigger issue for Atlanta, is the reputational issue that gives credence to those who are attacking the ability of the city to manage the world's busiest airport.
Phil, switching gears, I know you want to talk about American government and Georgia's university system.
That's right. There was a win for those of us who don't like the dumbing down of our students in Georgia. And what I'm referring to is a University System of Georgia official tried to have a proposal to reduce the core curriculum, and one of those requirements was the required course for the study of the U.S. Constitution, Georgia Constitution government. And he wanted to abolish that. So the regents got upset. There was a lot of pushback. You've heard me talk about it on the program before, that that was really a stupid proposal. And the good news is that Denley has admitted that that now is not going to happen.
All right, well, we're going over government, at least I was, with my kids, my 3rd grader and my 6th grader, so education at its finest, and I know we'll be moving on. So coming up, winners and losers, everyone. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Well, I know I speak for the panel on this Memorial Day weekend. We like to honor and say thank you to the brave men and women who sacrificed for this country. And Phil, I'll start with you, but I want to say happy anniversary to you and Bonnie. I won't say how many years unless you want to say, but congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. We were married very young, but anyhow, I want to make my winner somebody I think everybody on this panel knows, and that's Mark Burkhalter. He was a longtime North Fulton state legislator. He briefly served in the State House of Representatives as Speaker, and he was nominated by President Trump just the other day to be the U.S. ambassador to Norway. And so his confirmation is pending in the U.S. Senate, and so he is my winner, and I think we might get some seconds on this panel.
Yes, congrats to Mark Burkhalter for sure. I covered him for several years.
I got one loser though, Lori, and that is Stacey Abrams, Georgia's imaginary governor. She's still claiming that the election was stolen from her, and it's just a myth, and it's a shame we have to keep hearing it.
Brian, we'll move on to you, and I want to say congratulations to you and Tharon, because and Dennis O'Hare, who the podcast that you all do, Political Breakfast, it's in the top 40 of all political podcasts to listen to. So since I both have you on, congratulations, and go ahead for your winners and losers.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Laura. We appreciate that. We have a lot of fun doing it. I want to make my winner Georgia's nursing homes, because the good news that Governor Kemp is giving about that declining rate is because nursing homes finally have the testing that they need, the PPE that they need, and they have been searching desperately for it from starting 2 months ago when all this broke, and nobody anywhere had everything that we needed to address this pandemic. So the fact that we are bending the curve the way that we are is because they have responded so well. I also want to make my winner Phil Kent on his 32nd wedding anniversary, and also two people very important to me, my parents, who are celebrating 48 years together this week, Gordon and Paula Robinson. Love you guys.
A lot of love on this show today. Congratulations. Cathy, we'll move over to you.
Great, thanks. I want to give a shout out to Comer Yates and the folks at the Atlanta Speech School. When things started happening with the coronavirus, they introduced free online pre-K and have expanded that program. People from all over the country are tapping in and helping their kids get ready for school through this program that they're doing, and they're doing a lot of other support for new parents, and it's a great gift to the country that they're doing, and certainly something we should be proud of in our community. And I just want to say to Mark Burkhalter, good luck, because you know you're going to be ambassador to Norway for about a minute and a half before the regime change happens.
Tharon, we have about a minute to go.
All right, definitely want to add my support and congratulations to Mark Burkhalter. He was my suite mate when I was at McKenna Long and Aldridge, which is now Denton, so good luck to him. Also want to give a big shout out to Fred Simmons. I met him this week when I was at PDK Airport in the Epps area, and his wife and Fred, they watch the show religiously, so I want to give them a shout out. And my last winner is going to be Commissioner Gary Black. in the Georgia Grown campaign. They went around the state of Georgia this week and delivered over 13,000 boxes to people in the rural areas and also in the metro areas, particularly in DeKalb County. And so definitely want to make them a big winner for all the work that they're doing to make sure that people have food in Georgia.
That's a huge accomplishment. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Brian, again for filling in for Janelle. We will see all of you next week. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you again.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.